Welcome everybody, I'm Max. Just thought we'd take you through another project that we just finished up about a month ago. Things are, working well through this heat that we're experiencing here in Nashville. This was a really fun project. If I could just bottle this thing up and just redo this over and over again, it would be an amazing experience in working. These were super fun clients. This project has a whole bunch of really neat nuances to it. When I kind of was giving my project a title, I called it an HGTV makeover. This backyard here that we've got, you can see they already had this beautiful screen porch. But when you were in the screen porch, just everything around it was really drab and really boring. And this whole space back here was just kind of like grass that didn't grow that well, held water. Where we're standing here, it was currently just, a small little pad. So, this transformation that we were able to take through for this project was really, really fun, because this phone call started with the client was, well, we want to do something in our backyard. We just want a place for a fire pit, which we've created. And then through the conversation and budget talks and all that kind of stuff, I was like, well, my wife would really like to level out the front yard. And as we go through that front of the yard, you'll see that actually ended up being one of my favorite touches to this home. But this backyard really kind of captures a lot of my style, a lot of how I try to design for things. I like to keep things simple, not necessarily a whole bunch of time to be out gardening. They like plants, they'll do a little work in the garden, but we didn't want to overwhelm them with too much stuff to do outside. They really wanted to be able to enjoy their garden. So, as we go through this, you'll see a lot of my touches with bricks and walkways and the use of gravel. You'll kind of get a good sense of what this yard was before, especially with the befores, and then how it all turned out and came together in one kind of cohesive garden. This backyard was a little bit of a challenge because, it kind of sat a little bit low, and it's a small space, but yet could have a big dramatic impact here. So one of the things that I did for this homeowner here was create a spot for them to sit around their solo stove so they could have some nice, fall fires, early spring fires, winter fires. But, when I'm trying to create a garden, one of the most important parts of a garden, when you think of a garden, you think of plants and all that kind of stuff. But there's also, your choice of your patio, your hardscapes, your wall material, all that kind of stuff matter and play a really important role into the overall feel for that garden. So over the years, as this garden evolves, right, with, originally we had, many more containers all throughout this whole space, because I wanted to get the plants up and out of these gravel beds that I've created here, because I was concerned about just water sitting around the base of the home and all that kind of stuff. So I did this to be able to help push all this water around the house. And you can just kind of see a nice little 12 by 12 patio here with a clay paver. A lot of times I'm always trying to push for natural material. In I think it was about the early 90s, there was a big move for concrete pavers. And I was, one that jumped on that trend and really was excited about all of that kind of stuff. But then when I, had the opportunity to work with a designer that had been designing landscapes for 40 years, and I showed up at some of his projects that he was sharing with me, and they were timeless. And when I kind of talk about a timeless landscape, I would want to be able to walk into a landscape and not know that it was built in 1992. I kind of consider a lot of those trendy materials like brass fixtures, on your interior. So when I'm designing landscapes, I'm always trying to push my clients into a natural stone material or a natural clay paver like we have here in this backyard. And then, you can do a lot of different stuff with them. There's different colors. They're usually generally this size, but you can lay them in a herringbone pattern. You can lay them in a running-bond pattern. You can just stack them in 2 squares, 2 squares. So there's some fun stuff that you can do with it. It really adds warmth to a garden and completely sets the tone. You can see this is just a natural cut blue stone. This will always belong, always go in place. You can see it complements the home. It creates a nice simple walkway to that back. And you can see here from just this angle looking back, there's a little bit like, hey, I want to go back there. What's going on there? Gives a little bit of mystery, and that container sitting there just adds a nice bit of depth and texture to that, to where when you're in there, you feel separated from where we are here. This is something that I want to talk about. So when I'm creating gardens, I'm always cognizant about gardens that get too big, too wide, because they can be really difficult to care for over the years. You know, how do you get in there? Walking around, you gotta step on plants, you get too many weeds, they can take over. So this little sitting area kind of came about of, man, I don't feel good about this big area of bed. So we created a nice little sitting area off the side to, you know, to where, you know, the homeowners talk about already sitting, sipping their coffee, watching kids walk around. Beautiful hornbeams here that we've got planted. I love a hornbeam, Franz Fontaine. This is a really cool plant because I can plant these in small spaces and create a really tall hedge. You can imagine as these grow together how private this will feel. So as we kind of walk through this garden path here, just a naturalized garden as we walk through, and you can just imagine as all of this stuff starts to fill up and grow, it'll really create a lot of interest from inside. This is one of my favorite plants that I like to use. This is Panicum heavy metal grass. I love this grass because it's one that stays really tight and upright. You know, a lot of times I say, hey, I want to plant ornamental grass, and people are like, oh, I hate the way they look messy and they flop and all that kind of stuff. That's why I use this heavy metal. It stays nice and upright. It gives me that element that a lot of the grasses don't do. It's got a little blue hue to it. And you can just start to see now it's starting to show a little bit of its you know, fall seed head, which gets really pink and pretty. But probably one of the best things about ornamental grasses in general is when the wind, you know, kind of pushes through them, you get a little movement, but you also get some nice sound out of them. You know, the right ornamental grass in the right place can really have a dramatic impact in your garden. We were just trying to create a reasonable walkway to be able to walk all the way around the house. You know, I was trying to create a garden walk. You know, so we've got some salvia, some purple cone flowers with the grasses in the background. Serviceberry, amelanchier, gets a really pretty spring flower. The fall color is generally an orangey tint. But it's a really fun plant because as it grows, it gets a little more open and airy, so it doesn't have this real dense, you know, habit to it. Birds love it. You'll see lots of birds sitting on these, and it's just a great way to bring nature a little bit closer to your house. And as we kind of get around here to this front yard, this was like, you know, I imagined this was what it was gonna look like, but I didn't imagine that it was gonna be one of my favorite parts of it. This whole yard was just one big slope down to the old existing wall that was there previous. And it just wasn't usable at all. So to be able to have this space here where you can come in here and you're kind of trapped, you know, with a gate, which is nice to be able to watch your kids and to be able to have a usable space at a front yard that was before not usable one bit. It was hard to mow, all that kind of stuff. To be able to create this much interest near the front porch and to be able to give this kind of height and just nuance to be able to draw your eye here, there's just no better way to do it, in my opinion, than these containers. Because if this was on the ground, it would probably look a little bit messy and uncared for. So you get them in a pot, give a little height to them, they look like they belong. You know, we don't always have a great opportunity to use lavender. It's kind of a little bit of a finicky plant, but you can obviously see in this application here in front of this wall with really good drainage, full sun, it is thriving and having a great time here. We've got boxwood hedge behind it. You know, that's gonna get about 2 foot tall, turn into a square. You can imagine the layer and the texture that all of this is gonna offer to this front garden bed. You know, this was obviously existing, and I think it's awesome with the moss and everything on it. I think it belongs. I hope one day that the new wall that we built actually has that starts to grow up there, and it could just really give a cool garden. You know, you can just kind of see, you know, that fence was originally down on top of this wall, and it didn't really serve too much of a purpose. But you can just see how that picket fence held up high, defining that space has really made a really cool impact for this home. I can't wait to see it once it gets painted. You know, one little touch on this wall that turned out really great is if you saw this at night with, you know, you can kind of see the little hockey puck lights, and it just really adds dimension at night to this garden that is really fun and warmth. When I'm designing lights, I think it's really, really important that you have dark space. You know, a lot of times you'll come to homes that have been landscape lighted and they're just overdone. It looks like everything is just pronounced and it's really overly lit. I find it very, very important to have dark space. Even on your paths, you almost want your lights to not quite touch, so you have a little bit of space there in between, so you can just have a little bit more of an experience of going in through those shadows and that kind of stuff. You know, this was a really fun project then I like to always kind of remind people when we're getting started in this process of creating a landscape that this should be a fun experience for you. And if you're not having fun, I'm not doing a good job for you. So we're really, I try to emphasize that when you decide to work with myself or Gardens of Babylon and we're moving forward, I really want you to be excited about it. I want to have a good time with you. I want you to bring your ideas and I'll try to help keep things on the right target as far as, making sure we're moving in the right direction and we're not building something or doing something that's going to long-term cause you havoc. But if you're interested in working with Gardens of Babylon and creating a space like we've done here, please give us a call.